Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. These will be my final thoughts on the Alexander Povetkin and Hughuie Fury fight at the O2 in London on August 31st. This really is a bit of an odd coupling in terms of a matchup. Not a fight I was expecting. It's the one we've got, and it's been a relatively sedate build-up. Not a lot of hype, not a lot of buzz, but it is a very intriguing fight. I'm oddly looking forward to this one, and I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, part of it could be Alexander Povetkin is knocking on the door of 40 years old. He'll have his 40th birthday on the 2nd of September. And Hughuie Fury is a guy who's come up short a couple of times at world level, and this is his third time. Will it be the third time lucky? I think a lot of people are saying no right now because Hughuie Fury, in some of these losses, he hasn't looked particularly good. I mean, although Mick Hennessy, pulled out the infamous Shades of Ali line in the fight against Joseph Parker back in 2017, he wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't do enough in that fight to get the win. There was just too much defense, not enough offense, and Joseph Parker got a decision. And this is one of these fights where Hughuie Fury and his team has said that he suffered from some bad luck in the past. But if anything, the Parker fight was a demonstration that he needed to be more aggressive, and we've seen some of that from Hughuie Fury in the past year or two. The Sam Sexton fight was a good example of that. A comeback fight. He had been working on a right hand. He landed it on Sexton, but it's that right hand that he's seemingly fallen in love with, and just through ad nauseum in the Kubrat Pulev fight and also the Samuel Peter fight, and it largely looked to be a somewhat ineffectual, wide-arcing, looping shot that didn't really have a lot of finesse about it, highly telegraphed, and it seems to be Hughuie Fury is betwixt and between about what he wants to do in terms of his style now, and they've labelled him as one of the best technicians in the heavyweight division, one of the best technical boxers in all of the heavyweight division and in the UK, but I'm not sure we've really seen much of that in some of his recent outings. I mean, are we going to see Hughuie Fury maximize his height and reach in this fight with Alexander Povetkin? He's the much bigger guy by about 4 inches in terms of height. He's got a few inches in reach over Alexander Povetkin. Povetkin will need to do something to come inside to get his work away on Hughuie Fury. Let those hooks go. So for Hughuie Fury, surely he's got to try actually ram that jab down Alexander Povetkin's throat. You would have to think he's not going to be throwing out these really soft, flicking jabs, as he often does in his fights. He doesn't really commit to the jab. It's not something that has really been a major weapon for him. And hopefully he's going to sort of tighten up on this wide arcing right hand that seems to be telegraphed all the way from the back of the fourth row, and he can actually throw it a bit straighter and maybe mix in a bit of variation, because the last few fights he only has looked like he wants to detonate the right hand, and he's become highly predictable. And Povetkin, as I said, he's knocking on the door of 40 years old. How is he going to overcome the reach and the height of Hughuie Fury? What does he do to get inside? Can he throw feints? Can he do enough to actually get in and get his work away against Fury? And we do know to some extent Hughuie Fury's got a decent chin, but Alexander Povetkin, in my thinking, is the hardest puncher that Fury would have faced. And if Povetkin can get a couple of left hooks and overhand rights away, Hughuie Fury, his chin will really be tested like it's never been tested before. So I'll get to a couple of comments from both the fighters and then a couple of other thoughts. But in terms of Hughuie Fury, he says, Povetkin is a good opponent. I believe that I belong at this level. I'm going to prove it. Eddie showed me the other potential opponents, but at the end of the day, if you believe you're the best, then you want to fight the best. And I do. I've had a bit of bad luck in previous fights, but this is the time for me to shine and show people what I'm made of. And I'll jump in there, because this bit of bad luck, I'm not so much sure it is bad luck. He didn't do enough against Joseph Parker for the judges to give him the win there. He wasn't offensive enough. And in the Kubrat Pulev fight, he went into that fight with an injury. And that injury opened up. It was that cut over the eye. So that's not bad luck. That was a calculated risk. So I do hope that if Hughuie Fury comes up short in this one, then they're not going to be looking for another excuse, because I think a lot of us have had enough of them. Sure, Hughuie Fury is young, he's 24, but he's been fighting at quite a decent level for some time now. He's not, some wet behind the ears prospect. He's got over 20 fights, he's had a couple of world level experiences now. If he comes up short at world level for a third time, I think we really do have to reassess Hughuie Fury's place in the heavyweight division, and in terms of where his stock really is and how far he can go. Because, sometimes you can have these guys who say that Fury himself says he's a top 5 guy in the heavyweight division. He may be the only person that puts himself in that top 5 apart from his father, who's also his trainer, Peter Fury. So I hope there won't be any excuses if Fury comes up short again. And I've said before, they keep rushing him back to world level instead of doing a longer, more protracted build-up where he steps through some, different levels. He's gone from a faded and jaded Samuel Peter and a completely overmatched, padded record in Chris Norad to Alexander Povetkin. That makes zero sense. And Hughuie Fury says he's up for the challenge. Well, we are going to see. And for Povetkin, I've always thought this is a really strange fight for him to take. Like I said at the start of the video, it's an odd coupling. Why was he taking this fight? Was there nothing better out there for him? What does this do for Alexander Povetkin? And even if he wins, will he really get a lot of credit? Because people will say, well, Hughuie Fury is proven that he's not at world level. That's exactly what people will say. And on the flip side of the coin, people will say if Hughuie Fury wins, he may not get the credit that he deserves, because they'll say Alexander Povetkin was knocking on the door at 40 and had been out of the ring for a full year. And maybe that will be a factor. Povetkin's inactivity is not good. A fighter approaching 40, out of the ring for a year, that's, a few alarm bells are going off for me. And there may come a time, and this may be the opportune time for Hughuie Fury to catch an aging Alexander Povetkin. It could be the right fight at the right time for Hughuie Fury. Some of these things could have factored into why they've taken this fight. And Fury, he continues in some recent statements he made, stylistically, I think he is perfectly made for me. He's a good fighter who can't be underestimated, and one shot can end it all in the heavyweight division. We've been working on things in this camp and brought in some very good sparring partners who we've done lots of rounds with. I'm really looking forward to this, and you will see on the night how I handle Povetkin. Yeah, and we will. There's been a lot of big talk before. I remember Hughuie Fury ahead of the Peter fight said they'd been working on some things and that they'd be showing them on fight night. I didn't really notice anything much of note that he did differently. If anything, he reverted to type, and this whole arcing right hand that he'd fallen in love with just seemed to be, he seems to think he's a big puncher now. And obviously, the right hand is not either finding the target, or when it is, it's not doing the damage that he thinks it should be. In terms of Alexander Povetkin, he is saying, I will be simply boxing. I will not be pumping up myself for a knockout. I've trained with a focus on the close fight. I sparred with tall partners, tried approaching closer and working on avoiding the opponent's jab, using them for various combinations, dodging and stepping aside. And the key for Alexander Povetkin is overcoming the height and the reach to get inside, get his work away, and obviously if he can do that, he's going to score points, and if it goes all 12, it'll be interesting to see what happens here, because I think Povetkin, just on the face of it, I would expect him to outwork Hughuie Fury. Fury is a bit of a low-volume fighter to some extent. He does just enough in some rounds to win rounds. He's not exactly always dominating a round to get it, and that's been part of his problem. Say with the Parker fight, there were some close rounds, but obviously they didn't go his way. And some of his tactics, being on his bike and circling the ring and being, quite negative at times, it didn't, win the judges over. And if Povetkin is the aggressor, he's a pressure fighter tracking forward, that could be, obviously a big thing in his favour in some of these close rounds. The judges may award him rounds on the back of his pressure. He's the guy that is, being the ring general and putting the pressure on. But I like this fight. It's intriguing for a number of reasons, but I do sort of think that it could be one of these fights where, it's got potential to be a real stinker. That Parker and Fury fight, that wasn't exactly the greatest heavyweight title fight in the world. It was a little bit sort of, ho-hum at times. But there's a part of me that sort of thinks if Hughuie Fury is prepared, as he has been against some lower tier opposition fighters, to try mix in a bit more output on the offensive end, it could end up being a bit of a war in spots, and especially if he can get Alexander Povetkin hurt. And let's face it, Alexander Povetkin can be hurt. He's been down on the canvas a number of times in fights. I mean, you think Vladimir Klitschko and Anthony Joshua, although Hughuie Fury is not those guys. But if Povetkin on aging legs approaching 40 is tiring in the second half of the fight, maybe he doesn't have to be those massive power punches, and if he lands one of those looping right hands, maybe it could do some damage and put Povetkin on the canvas. So there's part of me that thinks this could be a real sort of barn burner, but then the other half I'm like, no, well, if Hughuie Fury reverts to type, and if he starts to really get on his bike to try to get some respite from Povetkin's pressure, then it could devolve into a bit of a stinker. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this, oddly looking forward to it. How about you? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.